Every cell in your body is like a bustling city. There's stuff constantly moving in and out to keep everything running smoothly. From oxygen entering your blood cells to waste products being carried out, these exchanges are happening every second of every day. This process is called cell transport, and it's one of the fundamentals of life. So in this presentation, we're going to explore the main ways that cells move substances across their membranes, the difference between passive and active transport, and how these processes help maintain balance inside the cell. By the end, you'll see how these microscopic movements have a big impact on the health and survival of all organisms. At its core, cell transport is about controlling what enters and what leaves the cell. The movement can happen in a variety of ways depending on the size, shape, and even the chemical properties of what's being moved. Broadly speaking, transport falls into two categories. You've got passive transport, which doesn't require energy, and active transport, which does require energy. We'll also take a peek at bulk transport, which helps move large particles or large amounts of particles. Understanding how we categorize these things can help you visualize how the cells solve the challenge of being able to interact with their environment without losing control of their internal conditions. So on this slide, I have passive and active transport. I don't have any bulk transport on here. So our first three that we see on this slide, the diffusion through a membrane, diffusion through a channel, and facilitated diffusion, are all types of passive transport because there's no energy involved. But if you look at our last two, the active transport and the pump, both of these things require energy to move particles, so we're going to call those active transport because it's an activity. So why should we care about cell transport? Because the survival of a cell, and therefore you, depends on its ability to exchange materials efficiently. So it's not just about getting things in and out, it's about getting things in and out at the right speed, at the right time, just to maintain a balance. So without these transport systems, cells couldn't get essential nutrients, eliminate waste, or communicate with their surroundings, because you've got things in your body like hormones that need to travel through your bloodstream and move into different organs. In your own body, cell transport is muscle contractions, nerve signaling, nutrient absorption in your digestive system. If anything goes wrong with the diffusion processes here, the effects can be serious, like dehydration, swelling, or even some diseases happen when transport proteins stop working correctly. Cell transport isn't just a biology topic. It's the foundation for understanding how life works and medical treatments, and like in TV shows and stuff about hospitals, they stick in the IV bag. Well, have you ever wondered how the IV bag works or why they stick a needle full of water in your arm? That's what cell transport is all about. So the cell membrane is the control center for cell transport. It's made of something called a phospholipid bilayer with embedded proteins. So the phospholipid bilayer has a hydrophobic, which means it's afraid of or it doesn't like water, and hydrophilic regions, which means that it does like water. And this kind of helps it form a barrier. So the heads of my phospholipid, okay, that's the red part on my little diagram that I have, are going to be hydrophobic. They're going to repel water because we don't want all of these liquids to just flow into the cell. But the inside, where the tails are, is going to be hydrophilic because if water does get through our hydrophobic heads, we kind of want to keep it where it's at. And then this structure also helps keep it fluid so that your cells can bend and mold in whatever shape they need to be. The proteins that we have embedded in our membrane act as gates, channels, or pumps that can help move particles in specific ways. So some of our proteins are going to act like a revolving door where if you fit through the door, you can pass on through. It's all good. Some are like conveyor belts where they just help things move across the membrane faster, getting them where they need to go. The other thing that makes our cell membrane special is that it's what we call selectively permeable. So not everything can pass through our membrane, not everything can pass through these proteins. Only what we want to pass through will be allowed to. So when we have too much water in our cells, our cell membrane is going to constrict or get tighter so that it's harder for more water to enter our cell. Or if we don't have enough water, we don't want that water to leave our cell, so it's going to constrict and make it harder for it to leave the cell. And this is all helping our cells maintain a stable internal environment, even when the external environment is constantly changing. So without this barrier, the cell would be vulnerable to uncontrolled changes that could disrupt its functions or even cause it to die. So the cell membrane is really the key to everything involving cells and cell transport. They're like our doorman. They control what goes in, what goes out, when, how, and why. So let's get into it. Our next focus is going to be passive transport. So like I said before, passive transport requires absolutely no energy from the cell. Our molecules are going to move from an area of high concentration to low concentration. We also call this going down the concentration gradient. And cells will keep doing this movement until equilibrium is reached. And equilibrium is the word we use when we mean that it's an equal concentration on both sides of the membrane. So if we look at our diagram here, I have two main types of passive transport here. The first one is simple diffusion, where we have small particles that they fit, they're non-polar, like oxygen, carbon dioxide, they can just slip through the membrane, just slide on through. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. They just move through the membrane from a high concentration to a low concentration. The other type of passive transport that I wanted to focus on was facilitated diffusion. So these guys can't pass through the membrane. Either they're polar molecules or they're large molecules like glucose or sugar. So we use a channel protein or a carrier protein to help these guys get in or out of the cell. In this case, we're helping them go into the cell. So my channel protein, easy peasy. It's got basically a hole. It's like a straw. And the molecules just slide through it and slide straight into the membrane. The carrier protein is a little bit slower. So it's going to open up on one end, let one molecule in, close, and then open again on the inside of the cell. So it's a little bit slower, but it still gets the job done. And carrier proteins are usually used when we need just a little bit of a very large molecule. And then the other type of passive transport that can sometimes get a little wonky is called osmosis. This is the diffusion of water. Osmosis only ever refers to water. So if you ever hear anybody talk about osmosis and they're talking about salt or Gatorade, then you know they don't know what they're talking about. Osmosis is only water. And osmosis is a little special because water can do either simple diffusion, where it just goes through the membrane, or it can do facilitated diffusion, where it has to use a protein to go through the membrane. It all kind of depends on the type of cell, the type of environment, and really how we're moving things through the body. So those are 3 types of passive transport. Our other type of transport is called active transport. Active transport needs energy from the cell to work. And usually we use this energy in the form of something called ATP, or adenosine triphosphate. You guys don't need to know what that means. So the other special thing about active transport is it's going to move things against their concentration gradient, meaning it's going to go from a low concentration to a high concentration, kind of like pushing a ball uphill. It's going to take more effort versus just letting it roll down the hill like we did with passive transport. Active transport is essential in a lot of our body processes. A great example is the sodium-potassium pump in our nerve cells. This pump is going to move sodium ions out of the cell and potassium ions in, which helps keep an electrical charge across the membrane so that our nerve impulses can fire. And active transport is also used in things like nutrient uptake in your intestines or kidney function. Because sometimes maybe you haven't had enough water in the day and your kidneys trying to filter out all of the nutrients from the water in your bloodstream, but you just don't have enough water to go around. So sometimes your kidney will spit water back out to help keep that stabilized. So active transport is another really important part of cell transport. Another important type of cell transport is referred to as bulk transport. So sometimes we have particles that they're too big to use a protein channel, or we just need so much of one particle that it's easier to just pull in a whole bunch all at one time rather than let them go through one by one. So we have two main types of bulk transport. We have exocytosis, which is when things exit the cell, and endocytosis, when things enter the cell. So these types of transport are going to use something called vesicles, which are these little bubbles or membrane sacs that we see in this picture. And endocytosis, the cell is it's gonna make a little hole in the membrane that's still made of a phospholipid bilayer, and then it's gonna pinch it off into a bubble, and then the bubble will open inside the cell. Exocytosis is going to be kind of the opposite. We're gonna take some of our internal membrane, which is something most of our cells have, and we're going to wrap it around those particles we don't want anymore. And then the bubble is going to go up to our plasma membrane, and once it makes contact, it's going to open up. It kind of looks like the same process, but in reverse. So this process is used a lot by our immune system. So white blood cells, they'll go in and they'll quite literally just eat bacteria and viruses, and then they'll dispose of them. So that's another way that we use exo and endocytosis. And the other problem with this, why our cells don't just use this as our main mode of transport, is it needs a lot of energy. So you need energy to make the bubble in the first place. You need energy to transport the bubble, and you need energy to make the bubble meld into our plasma membrane. So all of those steps require energy. So we don't use it very often, but it is very important that we understand how it works, because like I said, it's used in a lot of bodily processes. So cell transport helps explain why certain medical treatments like IV fluids are used. So IV fluids aren't actually just water. They are something we call isotonic solutions. That means that the fluid inside the IV bag has the same level of, we'll say, hydration as the cells in your body. And that's going to help keep you hydrated, especially if like you're about to go to surgery and you can't drink water or eat food. It's going to help keep your body stable. So again, we have a few types of cell transport. We've got our passive transport, which is our simple diffusion, where things just move through the membrane, facilitated diffusion, where they use a protein, and osmosis, which is the movement of water. And all three of these are going to move things without energy. But our active transport is going to use ATP, or energy, just like our bulk transport, our endo and exocytosis. They're going to move large materials, large quantities of materials, and our regular active transport is just going to move things against the concentration gradient, like with our nerve cells.